Cultural humility. Learning outcomes. Upon completion of this module, students will be able to describe efforts at lifelong learning and self-reflection in relation to cultural humility. Identify professional opportunities to mitigate power imbalances. Outline personal responsibility to address institutional accountability. Teaching. Cultural humility. When I was first exposed to this term, I actually felt a bit put off by it. I'm proud of my culture, and I think there are clear advantages to the culture I grew up in that have helped me to lead the life I have. This is, of course, a form of ethnocentrism. And we may all have a degree of it. Ethnocentrism can be defined as the viewpoint that your own culture is natural and correct while other people's cultures are incorrect, unnatural, or inferior. We are all guilty. It is natural to have a general sense of ethnocentrism because the culture we have grown up with is the one that we are the most familiar with. Let's define our culture in this way. Culture is made up of 4 elements: values, norms, expectations, and material culture. Values. Values refers to our beliefs about what is important. Importance can be intrinsic to the thing itself, or it can be defined as being relatively important, as in a list of the most important to least important things. A value that I grew up with had to do with working and employment. Having grown up in a farm community with obligations to work the annual harvest, I have developed a very strong work ethic. Norms. Norms have to do with our understanding as to what is normal human behavior. This particular part of culture can vary widely even within the same general culture, perhaps family to family or even person to person. A set of norms include cultural facts such as language, gender norms, and adult norms. These describe the norms for communication, gender-specific behaviors, whether I believe they are correct or not, and adult behaviors that distinguish children versus adults. Expectations. Expectations come in 2 flavors: social status, roles, and institutions. Social status and roles refer to the diversity of our job titles in society. Brother, sister, parent, worker, nurse, etc. These are all social status markers in our lives. Roles are the job descriptions that go along with this. Consider your current concept of what brother means. You have a clear understanding of the title, brother, and perhaps a good deal of understanding as to what should brothers do. Institutions in our society also have expectations thrust upon them. Consider what schools are supposed to do. What are police supposed to do? Each of these consist of knowledge we use to safely navigate the world. Material culture. Material culture is made up of the physical and material aspects of our world, our stuff. Some of our stuff retains a lot of value and importance, such as my wedding ring, while other stuff may not be as important or as well defined. We are surrounded by material culture and it impacts our worldview. Keep in mind that a lot of our stuff is important to our values and norms. Consider having a car, phone, computer, appliances, television, books, internet access, and even our home or apartment expresses a lot of what we expect and what we consider to be normal in others. Lifelong learning and reflection. The first steps in our journey toward cultural humility involve learning and reflection. I'm going to assume that if you are taking this training, you have an ongoing interest in learning new things and expanding your world, even if you are taking this training because you have to take it. People who work in the mental health field have an interest in people, and if you have any experience at all with people, you know that we are not all the same. In fact, among everyone we know, both professionally and personally, it is often the differences between those individuals that make them special to us. Now, the fact is, your social connections are probably, in many ways, similar to you. We tend to make connections with individuals who share our norms and values. We are more challenged when we are attempting to make connections with people who are very different than we are. Step 1: Learning. Let's consider what we know about the diversity of people in our world. Consider the following list of characteristics related to individual differences and your personal experience with them. You might be in many of these categories, but certainly not in all of them. Focus on the categories that are not a part of your own experience. Brown or black skin. Male, female, or non-binary. Grew up speaking a language different than English. Grew up poor. Grew up rich. Mental disability. Sensory disability, blind, deaf, etc. Cognitive disability, intellectual disabilities, autism, etc. City versus country. LGBT. Immigrant. Small pictures of different people. Consider each of the categories above that does not pertain to your personal identity. How much do you know about the lived experience of someone in these categories? Our first task in humility is to recognize that we have little to no idea what it is like. Even if you are a minority, you might share similar experiences, but you don't really know the lived experience of someone of a different minority. To address this, we ask questions, we research, and we remain open to the validity of the lived experience of others who are not the same as ourselves. Step 2: Reflection. Now that we have taken the time to humble ourselves regarding our knowledge of individual differences, let's reflect. When you read the categories above, did you have a mental image in your mind as to how a person with that identity looked? How they acted? I hope you have already admitted that you did not know much about many of these categories, yet you probably have a very clear image about a person like that. We all have these images. They are created by our minds to help us organize the world around us. However, because we often don't really know a lot about these categories, we create these images from very sparse information and the media. Let's call them what they are. They are called prejudices and biases. Don't be scared of the word. Creating ideas about people is a natural part of the cognitive process of memory construction. What we need to do is reflect upon these assumptions we make about other people and ask ourselves where these assumptions came from. By learning more about people different than ourselves and reflecting on how we have constructed our prejudices, we can choose to deconstruct these ideas and develop new images and ideas in our minds. Power imbalances. The next leg on our journey challenges us to develop an understanding of power. When someone possesses power, they are able to allocate more resources and influence situations to their desire. Even if those desires are wholesome and good, those in power are more likely to get their way. Despite our best intentions, power imbalances occur along the lines of these categories. Demographics to show that white males continue to dominate many power structures. Things are getting much better, but these inequalities still exist. In our day-to-day work, we need to become increasingly aware of power dynamics. In a client-case manager relationship, there is an imbalance of power. We often use this power in meaningful and benevolent ways, such as when we urge a client to go with Plan A instead of Plan B. Nonetheless, power inequalities are present. A lot of the time, power balances have to do with a person's status in a social situation. Think of the term status this way. A status can be thought of as a job title that you have in life. Another word, role, is the job description. You have lots of statuses and roles in your life. Brother, sister, worker, son, daughter, student, teacher, case manager, taxpayer, club member, church member. The list goes on and on. You can also envision that for each one of these status, there is a job description. What is the job description of a student? Of a case manager? Status also reside on a vertical ladder. There are high status and low status. Our culture defines these relationships based on a lot of factors, but they all result in an unequal distribution of power across different people. In the mental health field, a case manager has more status than a client. The power dynamic matches this. When we become aware of these differences, it is up to the person of higher status to make adjustments in their behavior in order to address the inequality. As a case manager, you should be aware of times when you can be overly influential and, with all the best intentions, exert power over your client. We mitigate our power when we actively choose to not use it. For instance, if I want to empower my client, I can make effort to be mindful as to how much I take part in the decision-making process. Remember, in many instances we welcome others' decision-making in our lives. Institutional accountability. Our status usually play out in the various institutions we operate in. An institution is simply a somewhat organized social unit. Your workplace, Your school, your family, your clubs, are all institutions. You have a status, job title, and a role, job description, in each of these institutions. All institutions have their own culture and their own degree of ethnocentrism. This can lead to a situation in which a lack of understanding of diversity and unfair power imbalances can become institutionalized into the policies, practices, norms, and values of any organization. Critical race theory is a long-standing model that explores the institutionalization of racial inequalities in institutions. It is less a critique of our history than it is a call to recognize where these inequalities thrive and make efforts to address them. These institutional cultures often exist beneath the awareness of those in power because the inequalities lean in their favor. All is good. We have a personal responsibility to address instances of institutionalized barriers to diversity and institutionalized power imbalances. We should be aware of when these must be addressed in order to create a more welcoming environment for the people we serve. Can we recognize when policies and procedures, even informal cultural norms, like jokes and innuendo, can make for an unwelcoming environment? Assessment. Module 1 Assignment. Purpose. The purpose of this assignment is to process and reflect on our personal responsibility to educate ourselves on diversity, recognize power inequalities, and address institutionalized inequity. Learning outcomes. Upon successful completion of this assignment, you will describe efforts at lifelong learning and self-reflection in relation to cultural humility. Identify professional opportunities to mitigate power imbalances. Outline personal responsibility to address institutional accountability. Task. For this task you are going to select a category from the list in the lesson that is particularly foreign to you. You may also select a different category as long as you are sure it is in line with the purpose of this assignment. You will conduct research on the nature of the category and construct this paper. In regard to this category or characteristic, address the following questions. 1. What were your assumptions, prejudices, and biases regarding this category prior to conducting your research? 2. What are the relevant cultural norms, values and expectations related to this category that are different than your own? 3. Considering a variety of different circumstances, how might power imbalances manifest for individuals in this category? 4. If you had a client in this category, how would you go about mitigating power imbalances in your work with this person? 5. What are some institutionalized barriers to equity for individuals in this category? You may address any set of institutions. Criteria for success. Your paper will be submitted to the Dropbox titled Module 1 Assignment. Regardless of the tools you use to create documents, you will convert your work to PDF and submit that version. You may need to explore how this is done in the tool you are using. Use the following rubric as a guide to creating your paper. Title page. Assumptions. Cultural norms, values, and expectations. Power imbalances. Mitigating power imbalances. Institutionalized barriers. References, if any. The assignment will be graded on 0 to 100 scale. You must get an 80 or above to pass the assignment. Opportunities for revision will be provided.